The purpose of this video is to assist you in your preparation of your second model building project, problem M2, entitled Service Company Financial Statements. I would encourage you to read through the model building hints in your book, or review your handout, or consider rewatching the short model building video which outlines these important concepts. You will be earning points for planning, documentation, completeness, accuracy, appearance, and flexibility. A blank screen in front of you and your book open to the appropriate page. In this problem, we are asked to create an Excel worksheet that will prepare a set of financial statements, including a single-step income statement, a statement of retained earnings, and a balance sheet. Remember that when the book refers to a financial statement worksheet, they're just referring to the fact that they want you to do it in Excel, which refers to these working papers as a worksheet. They are not talking about a 10-column worksheet as you did in problem P3. One important note, I am modifying the instructions a little, and I'm going to ask you to prepare a classified balance sheet. More on that later. A basic understanding of these financial statements is extremely important in your upper level business classes. Now, some of you may not be familiar with the statement of retained earnings. In Accounting 100, we only dealt with a sole proprietor firm, or a business that had only one owner and was set up as a sole proprietor. In that case, you learned how to do a statement of owner's equity shown here. Statement of owner's equity started with the beginning capital balance, added in net income, deducted out the drawings. The two of those resulted in either an increase or a decrease in capital, depending on whether the number was positive or negative, and the sum of those two added together equaled the ending capital. The statement of retained earnings takes the place of this statement when the entity is a corporate entity and not a sole proprietor. I put the statements side by side so that you can see how similar they are. A statement of retained earnings will be created as follows. You'll start off with the beginning retained earnings, which is money that the company has kept inside the entity and not distributed in previous years. You still add in net income, but instead of taking out drawings, the drawings in a corporate entity are referred to as dividends. The difference between those two results in either an increase or decrease in retained earnings, and then the sum of the beginning plus the increase equals the ending retained earnings. I wanted to go over that major difference before we attempt this problem. So once again, the only difference from Accounting 100 is that the second statement, the statement of owner's equity, is going to be replaced now by a statement of retained earnings. Same concept, they look very similar. I created this slide to refer back to in case you find yourself struggling a little bit. So let's get started. As always, document your work appropriately. This problem lends itself well to a data section answer section. This problem is a little odd in that the information is given to us in the text in alphabetical order, with the exception of the advertising expense, which for some reason wound up at the bottom of the table. We're not used to working with data in alphabetical order, but we will assume that this is what the company wants. So create a data section that has the data that the author gives you entered. I'm not going to enter all of the data, just enough to get you started. I plan on entering my data in alphabetical order, just as your author tried, but kind of failed to do. So take a moment and enter your documentation and your data section now. maybe you should consider pausing this video as you enter the data and then come back once you're done and we'll continue. Okay, so I have entered my data section. One thing I wanted to remind you about is the powerful features that you have built into the Excel program. I'm a terrible speller, so always, 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 before submitting my work to a client or to a student, I try and perform a spell check. Don't forget you have that feature. You can use the appropriate F key, or you can go to the Review tab, click on the spelling icon, and have it run a spell checker. I just noticed that I spelled accounts receivable incorrectly, so I'm going to have the computer change that, and looks like my spell check is okay. A spell check is not an end-all though. For example, there are some words that you can misspell, but the computer doesn't see it that way. One common one in accounting is a trial balance. Many people use the word trail balance. Since trail is a word, the spell check can't catch that. So don't always rely on the spell checker by itself. You also should be proofing your work, or possibly even having a loved one in your household proof your work. So once again, I've entered all the data. I've made sure that I've earned my documentation points by putting my name, the file name, and a purpose. I've also isolated my data section, and I have an answer section down here. As we're creating the answer section, remember the goal of a perfect template is one where the answer section is 100% referenced by either formulas or cell reference. Part of the planning process is refreshing your memory on what a typical set of financial statements look like. You may want to grab an old accounting book or even reference the internet. You want to look on the statement at things that are static or stay the same, and what things are expected to change from month to month or from year to year. Hear this. The things that change should be cell referenced to the data section. In a 100% flexible template, the user should not, I repeat not, have to make any changes whatsoever to the answer section. That means things like dates should be flexible. What does that mean? It means that it should flex forward with any changes. Instead of just typing in the data in the answer section, we will create a cell reference in the data section, and when the user changes it, the answer section will automatically 100% update. While we work on the answer section, let's think about the heading. We're not expecting the company's name to change, so I'll go ahead and put that in. Skitch Corporation. We're not expecting the name of the statement to change, so I'll go ahead and type that in. But that date we are expecting to change, because each month or each year, depending on when they do this template, the date will change. So I can't just type in the date. Instead, I want to cell reference the date. I'm going to show you two ways to do that. The first one follows what your author did in problem P4, where he typed the period ending date on one line like this, for the year ended, and then typed the period ending date on the second line with the cell reference to the data section. So just like we did on problem M1, the model building problem, if we scroll up to the top, I can go back in and have the user enter the date of possibly the balance sheet, because that'll be the period ending date on the other two statements as well. And once again, as we described on M1, if you put an apostrophe in it, that'll tell the computer that that is a date, or a label actually. and we will put in our ending date, which your computer tells you or your book tells you is June 30th, 2012. Having done that, I can go down here to the data section, and on the second line put equals, and then go cell reference the cell where I entered the date and press enter. Now whenever the data section changes, this answer section will automatically update. And of course I'll center all of this later. The other option is to use what's called a concatenate function. So let me erase this and demonstrate that to you. Okay, we can use the function called concatenate, which merges data and labels together. So how this would work is I would put what I want to appear in the third line of the statement, which is for the year ended, comma, then I'm going to put a space in. Whoops, didn't want the space there. I'm going to put the space here. And then I'm going to cell reference where I want the data to be picked up from. Okay, so I have for the year ended, then I'm going to put my comma, and then I'm going to go cell reference that data section again, press enter, and see what that did? It nicely put for the year ended June 30th, 2012. In the next data section, when I go change this to be the next year, this will automatically update. So again, that's using the concatenate feature where you put in the title that you want entered, and then behind the comma you can cell reference it. I personally like that one. I think it looks more neat and clean. So what's going to appear on our income statement? Your author told us to do a single step income statement. So what that means is we're only going to have sales and then all of our expenses. So it's up to you. You can type in the words or you can cell reference them. So here I'm going to go reference sales. Okay, and then I have quite a few expenses. So I'm going to go step by step and reference the various expenses. So again, I'm going up to the data section and I'm looking for expenses. These are in alphabetical order. So there's my advertising expense. Here's my, looking down, here's my general expense. Here's my interest expense. And here's my salaries expense. Okay, and again, if you prefer not to type them in, you can cell reference like I've done. Now I will go grab the numbers. So I'm going to go find my sales amount. And then I'll go find each of the expenses. So my advertising expense is here. And you get the picture. Here's my general expenses. Here's my interest expense. And here's my salaries expense. Again, this is what we call a single step income statement, meaning that net income is calculated by just doing a single calculation, which would be the revenues less the expenses. So let me total these up. Forgot to put my, oops, let me do that one more time. As you guys know, it's not just you that make mistakes, we make mistakes too. Try it one more time. We'll sum up those four expenses, and finally we'll get our net income. Now, I want you to think about something. Do companies always have a net income? And the answer is no. Sometimes companies suffer a net loss. So again, the goal in being flexible is to create a template where your user doesn't have to change anything. It's where you've thought of the circumstances ahead of time and you make the appropriate changes in the answer section. So for example, this last line of my income statement is going to be one of two things, only two possibilities. It's either going to be a net income or it's going to be a net loss. Can you think of a formula that would be able to have the computer decide whether it should type in net income or net loss? Question mark? Well, remember the equals if formula that we learned back in the payroll problem? That was a decision-making formula that allowed the computer to make a decision. So I'm going to calculate this amount by always taking the difference between the revenue and the expenses. And I want the computer to decide whether it should type in the word net income or net loss. Okay, this is required for anybody that wants to earn perfect points, because again, we don't want the user to have to come in and change anything. So I'm going to give it a stab. How about if this number is greater than 0, then the true result would be enter, get rid of that box. The true result would be to enter the word net income. Otherwise, if it's false, the only other option is it would be a net loss. So again, go back and review the equals if formula on anything on the template that you expect to change. Once I press enter, the computer is going to decide whether that's a positive number or above 0. If it is, it's going to write the word net income, and if it's not, it's going to write the word net loss. And in this case, it properly identified it as a net income. So we have some cleanup work to do. In other words, I need to put my single and double lines in. I need to put dollar signs on the first line in each column and on the last line, as you learned about in Accounting 100. Get rid of the cents. I don't need cents. And of course, we need to go back and clean our work up, which means, again, centering formulas and making it look presentable. So you covered all of this in the first 5 lessons in your quick book. You haven't had to use much of this up until the model building point, so don't be afraid to go back and take a look. Again, make your template the best it can be. So that means using lines to your advantage, color or black and white to your advantage, and just making it look its very best. When you do the second statement, the statement of retained earnings, think about what other things may change. In other words, will you always be adding in net income? What would happen if there was a net loss? Will there always be an increase in retained earnings? What other possibility is there? You should contemplate these things before developing formulas. Once again, a 100% flexible template will think about these things and create the proper formulas so that the user does not have to touch the answer section. So consider adjusting the wording of other statements in other places that may change. Hint, you will find in this problem that one data set gives you a net income and the other data set gives you a net loss. So I will be looking for some thought to be put into this problem, and all problems for that matter. A 20-point paper will be 100% flexible and pleasing to the eye. The second statement is the new statement of retained earnings, period. Here's an example that we went over earlier. As you're working on this statement, think about the things that may change between the different periods. For example, how would this statement change if you had a net loss? And is there always going to be an increase in retained earnings? Those are things I want you to think about as you're developing your template. As mentioned before, you are going to develop a classified balance sheet. A classified balance sheet is one where the assets are classified as to whether they are a current asset or a plant asset. A current asset is defined as an asset that is realized or turned over within a 1-year time period. So looking at your accounts, how many current assets do you see? Glancing at the accounts listed in your text, it looks like there's 3 current assets. Do you know what they are? Question mark. And as far as plant assets go, I see 2. And those 2 plant assets is the equipment balance and the related accumulated depreciation. Don't forget, GAAP says that when you have plant assets, you need to show 3 things. You need to show the cost, the accumulated depreciation, and the resulting book value. Make sure that your template does that. As always, you'll be turning in a printout of your formulas. I'm going to hit Control-tilde, which displays my formulas. I should see that there are no numbers entered here, that every part of your answer section should be made up whenever possible of cell references or formulas, and anything that changes, for example the date, should include some type of a flexible formula that will roll forward based on changes made by the user. So pay particular attention to this problem. Here's why. If you're a business major, you will be asked to either prepare or analyze lots of financial statements in your future classes. So it's important that you have a good handle on this problem. Secondly, your second in-class quiz will be similar to this problem. You'll be given a set of financial data and you'll be asked to create a set of financial statements. You should be familiar with how to do that for a sole proprietor, as you learned in Accounting 100, or for a corporation, which is the subject of this topic. Which reminds me, the only new thing that you may not have seen before on the balance sheet is the equity section. Last semester in Accounting 100, when you looked at the balance sheet for a sole proprietor, there was only one account included. It was the owner's ending capital account. When you do financial statements for a corporate entity, there will be 2 accounts in the equity section. And those 2 accounts are the common stock, which your author gives you the amount for, as well as the ending retained earnings that you will transfer over from the statement of retained earnings. This is an important problem, so please give it the time it deserves. As always, I'm available for help in any of the ways that we've previously discussed. I look forward to reading your updates, and as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.